Good morning, Phil. Great to see you today. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. Yeah. Down in
Good.
sunny Chichester.
Yeah, I was going to say, what part of the world do we find you in? So I guess with the current situation, the travel has been a bit reduced recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, so we're spending most of my time in Chichester, which is there can be a lot worse places to be. So we're very happy here, actually.
No, that's good. Well, no, I really appreciate you spending the time with us today because I know how busy you are, and I think it's great. It's a great opportunity to take the time to speak with you. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, clearly the work that Operation Smile does is very close to my heart. So it's really, yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast today, and yeah, a very sort of hopefully inspirational piece for me and also for the listeners.
Okay.
So I'll just get on with the first question, really. So obviously, in terms of the background, I know you're the co-founder of Operation Smile UK, and it's a business that's been running for 18 years now. So I thought, as a general summary to start off with, if you'd be able to tell us a bit more about how the charity was founded and your role within the organisation, that could be a good starting point to kickstart off, really.
Okay, well, I first started volunteering with Operation Smile back in 1995, which is 25 years ago now. And there were very few volunteers in the UK. And in 1999, I was called totally out of the blue by a journalist from The Guardian called Tim Radford. And he was writing an article about Operation Smile in The Guardian. And he asked me a couple of questions. I gave a couple of quotes. And in this article, a lovely half-page article, it basically said, Dr. McDonald, consultant anaesthetist from Chichester, said, and there was some quote from me. And the day the article went out, I was contacted by quite a significant number of companies, film companies, wanting to do documentaries. There I was a simple doctor in Chichester, and all these companies wanted to suddenly do a documentary. So fortunately, we ended up going with the BBC and did this documentary called The Facemakers, which was filming a mission and following some patients in Davao in the Philippines. And it was a lovely 50-minute documentary which went out prime time on BBC One in 2000. Now, because of that, there was obviously generated a lot of interest in this country about Operation Smile. And so we thought, well, we need to set up the charity in this country so that we can sort of raise funds and get more volunteers. So I was introduced to a few kind of financial entrepreneurs, and we had our first meeting in London I remember it to this day, in the Royal Ocean Racing Club, where I met all these financial entrepreneurs, people totally different business to me. And we decided to set up the charity, and eventually it became registered in 2002. And since 2002 till now, that's 18 years, we've raised over 35 million pounds, which is quite incredible, really. Because back in 2002, we had an office which was lent to us by Net Decisions. We had one employee. Now we have 15 employees in an office in London. And as I say, I'm very proud that as a trustee for 18 years and also medical director for 18 years, we've raised all that money over that time.
No, it's a huge achievement. I mean, as you say, it's something you must be very, very proud of. I mean, I think in terms of I suppose the reasons why you did it in the first place. I mean, was this something that was close to your heart as why you wanted to do this right at the beginning? I mean, was there something really driving you on to do that? Because I guess there's a number of ways I suppose you could have taken your skills and a number of causes you could have helped. So is there a specific reason why it was the Operation Smile route that you went down?
Well, as I say, it did all start as a bit of an accident because, I started working with Operation Smile. I was working in Adelaide at the Children's Hospital in 1995. And it literally was a total accident. There I was as a senior anaesthetic trainee in the coffee room. And one of my colleagues came in, a consultant came in and said, I'm meant to be going away with Operation Smile in 2 weeks' time, but family reasons I can't go. Can anyone else go? And I thought, put my hand up. 2 weeks in Bogota seemed like a good idea. And I went. So, and I suppose from that moment of seeing the difference that we made on a 2-week mission with Operation Smile, all the children's lives we changed. We operated on about 200 children that mission, and it just seemed such a valuable type of organisation. Obviously, there's a great need around the world, and it's so valuable that it's very infectious. Once you've been on one mission, you can't stop going on them, really. And when the opportunity came to actually be able to make it happen in this country, again, it was taking those opportunities. And I suppose that's always been a bit of a mantra in my life, really, is that, if an opportunity comes along, it may only come along once, you take that opportunity, and it's just grown from there.
Okay. Now, I know you've talked obviously about the great work you've done in terms of the setting up of the foundation and the fundraising behind it. I mean, in terms of your role, what else do you do? Because that also is, I think, it's quite important. I think, in terms of the more hands-on, I guess the day-to-day things you're involved in, it'd be quite good just to understand, how that works from your point of view.
You mean my day-to-day role at my normal workplace?
Yeah.
Oh, my normal. Well, I mean, I work as a consultant anaesthetist, which means I anaesthetise patients to have operations. So from an Operation Smile point of view, I anaesthetise the children for the surgeon to do the operation. I work at my full-time normal day job is working at the local hospital, which I'm very fortunate is only about a mile away. So I normally cycle to work in the morning, which is lovely. And, when I go and see, just take yesterday, for example, I was doing a children's operating list, where, in fact, we were doing investigations of MRI scans. Now, if you've got little babies, they don't lie still for half an hour to do the scan, so you have to anaesthetise them. But one of the main parts of that job is actually spending time talking with the parents who are extremely anxious that the child's going to have this scan, they don't know what they're going to find, they're worried about the anaesthetic. So a lot of my time is spent actually preparing the parents and the children for the operation. Then come the afternoon, I was anaesthetising patients for bariatric surgery, which is weight reduction surgery. So in the afternoon, in the morning, I was anaesthetising the smallest people in the hospital. In the afternoon, I was anaesthetising the largest people in the hospital. I mean, it's a really varied job, and that's what I love about it. I mean, for me, going to work on a day-to-day basis just isn't a chore. I just love my job, really.
No, I think, when I look back at the operations that I had, as I was getting a bit older, I think the last operation I had on my cleft lip and palate was when I was 13, and I can still remember the anaesthetist from that time, because obviously I think when you're younger you don't really know what's going on, but I think as you get a little bit older you're more conscious of what's about to happen, and that kind of moment when you're in the operating theatre, you're just waiting, and I mean, in those days, showing my age of it now, there used to be a huge mask that goes over your mouth. I'm not sure whether they still do that now, where there's different ways of anaesthetising people, but it's quite a scary thing to go through, and counting down from 1 to 10. And I just remember the people that were doing that, the anaesthetists that worked with me then, really, they helped massively in that sort of 5 minute period before actually being under. It's a huge a huge job to do, really, to put the patients at ease before the operation actually starts.
Yes, I mean, it is really particularly, well, it's important with everyone, but particularly with children. I mean, like yourself, you will have had a number of operations over the years. So if the first operation you go to, you're really scared of the anaesthetist, it's a complete nightmare after that, because the patient is always scared about coming in, and therefore it's so important that we get it right and actually make the children feel very relaxed. And as you say, we sometimes use a mask, we sometimes use IV, but we put special cream on so that they don't feel the needles going in, and we sometimes have to give a bit of sedation to settle them. But it's it's quite interesting, because sometimes it's actually the parents who are more anxious than the children. The children are an absolute dream. The parents we always bring the parents in, but they're sometimes, it's quite interesting, because when most parents hold it together until the moment the child goes off to sleep, and the moment the child goes off to sleep is then you just see, suddenly the parents suddenly, burst into tears. They kind of, all the kind of stress suddenly just goes out of them, and it's. I know what it's like. I've taken my own children to the operating theatre, and it's, when you're on the other side, it's a different story altogether.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good, as you say, you've been on the other side of the theatre, so the fact that you can empathise with what people are going through is, I think, it's important. I mean, I think it's you know how to put people's minds at rest, and hopefully make the situation more comfortable for everybody involved, really, on that side. And I mean, I just obviously early on you mentioned a bit about the great work you guys have been doing in the fundraising for Operation Smile. I mean, 35 million raised to date. And because obviously EMEA gains a partnership with Operation Smile, we're going to be hopefully adding to that number over the years. And I thought it might be good just for you to explain to the listeners, how the money is spent and where the money goes, really.
Okay, well, we obviously try and direct as much of the money to the front line as possible, and what we have different models, but our main model is running a mission model, and we used to run a lot of international missions. And in fact, if I just take you through a very, the basics of what our mission involves and where the money is being spent and why people make them realise, it does cost money for these things to happen. So, first of all, I would say that all the medical practitioners and all the nurses, doctors, any healthcare assistant who goes with us on these missions does it on a purely voluntary basis. So none of us are getting paid for doing this. None of the volunteers get any money out of it whatsoever. The money goes into the organisation of our missions. So a typical mission is, it's all about the team, and it's really exciting. We have a team of about 40, 45 people, and we all fly into a centre where we're going to be working. Sometimes we know a few people on the team. On the whole, we quite often won't know any of the other people on the team, but we're all highly skilled healthcare professionals who know our job. But it's bringing a team together on a day. The following day, we're working straight off. We can't waste any time. This isn't a holiday. So I'll give you an example of a mission we did and it's the first mission we did to Ethiopia, in fact. And we arrived there, we got to the Gion Hotel, met all people coming from all over the world arrived there, and we met all the local people who were going to help us as well. And the next day, we would start screening. So screening involves looking at all the patients who have been recruited to come for the operation. And so we go down to the Black Lion Hospital, and there we were faced with 600 children waiting. Now, 600 children, that's all very well and good, but they've all got a parent or two parents or a brother or sister. So there's about approaching 2,000 people lined up around the hospital in the middle of Ethiopia, in the middle of Addis, waiting to be seen by us. And what we do is that in the team, there will be surgeons, anaesthetists, nurses, speech therapists, dentists, ENT specialists sometimes, and paediatricians, so that every patient that comes to a mission site will get seen. It's crucial that everyone gets seen, and they'll get seen by everyone in the team. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine the logistics of that. In 2 days, we had to do screening. 600 patients. So every patient gets seen. And then we have to decide who we're going to operate on. The really heartbreaking and devastating side of all this is that these aren't just numbers. These are 600 real patients who need operations. And we know that the 5 days of operating we're going to be doing, we will only be able to operate on 200. And that is really heartbreaking when you start off in that position. Now, the idea is that whenever we go to the site, that we keep going back. We keep going back to the site time and again. And the idea is that we train the local people to do the operations. So we see all the patients, and over these 2 days, And this is where a lot of the really kind of amazing stories come out, where people have travelled for days to get there. And, you know, it's quite, it's so hard for us to decide who we're going to operate on, but we have a very set criteria of how we do that. And as I say, you know, I just give you an example. I remember of the stories you hear. I mean, just a very simple example of a 16-year-old boy who's called Sam. It's in Ghana, this child, actually. I remember sitting there in front of him a couple of years ago. And there was Sam. He was wearing a Man United football top. He looked just like a normal, he looked like my son. You know, my son was the same age, and maybe it's one of the reasons these stories often resonate. It's very similar to yours. And this child, 16 years, with a cleft lip, not being operated on. And I just said to him, so, well, you know, how's it affected you over the years? You know, how have you felt about it? And he just had 4 words, and he just went, I have no friends. And, you know, you just sit there, and, you know, it brings a tear to mind now, just even thinking about it. And I just think, you know, if that had been my 15, 16-year-old son going to school every day and being in the playground, in the corner, no one talking to him, you know, it's just devastating. And, you know, that week we changed that child's life. You know, his life was changed. He would actually be able to go and play football with the other people there and everything. So anyway, we see a lot of patients like that. You see a lot of really heartbreaking stories. And then, of course, we have to decide who we're going to operate on. And that day is always a very difficult day, because you have to talk to everyone and say, well, I'm really sorry we can't do it this time round, but you will come back. We give them a piece of paper saying you were here last year. When you come next year, we'll be here again. But as a parent, that isn't very helpful. So, you know, but we can only do what we do, and we've got to do it safely, and we can only do so many patients. So that takes us on then. We have a day where we tend to set up the operating theatres and do a bit of education for local people who are going to help us while we're there. And then we have 5 days of operating. And we run 5 or 6 tables. So we set off 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, operate until we've finished all the cases that we plan to do for the day. Sometimes that takes us on to 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. But it's so absolutely crucial that we only do it in a safe manner. We do it to the same standard that we would do in our own countries. And the thing that I always go back to is I always look at every operation we do as being a training opportunity. So we have, you know, the local surgeons, the local anaesthetists, local nurses. So when we're doing the operation, we're also training them to do the operation, so that ultimately they'll be able to take over that role going forwards. Then post-operatively, the kids, it's really sweet. In the evenings, the older ones who can appreciate it the most, or who can appreciate it, obviously the babies can't, don't they? So we give them a mirror, and you know, you have a 6, 7-year-old, and you give them a mirror to look in the operation and how their face has changed, and the change in their face, just the glowing smile that comes out. It's just, you know, it's just amazing, really, and it's incredibly rewarding for us to see that afterwards. You know, and you're never too old to have the operation. I mean, another story of an Ethiopian that was in the Addis mission we did that year, and this guy, he was about 70, and he'd been very fortunate. He had a cleft lip all his life. He was about 70. He had got married. He had children, and the first thing he said after he had the operation, he just stared into the mirror for 10 minutes. He just said, I can now kiss my granddaughter for the first time. And, you know, when you hear stories like that, it just, you know, it really hits you. And, you know, I get emotional thinking about it. I've told that story 1,000 times. It doesn't stop you kind of really having quite an impact on it. And then, of course, at the end of the 2-week mission, we usually have a big party. Everyone lets their hair down, and then we all go back home. Change people, really.
I mean, it's an amazing. I mean, yeah, say some of the stories you mentioned there. I think I know some of the stories are online on the website as well. And personally, it was one of the reasons why I picked up the phone to reach out to you guys, because I just realised how lucky I was going through this situation in the UK and having this. I almost expected that it was going to be sorted, whereas obviously in these types of countries you're helping in, there's a lot of people have to wait a long time, as you mentioned. I mean, it's the waves of emotion you must go through in that 2-week period. I mean, as you mentioned there, you go from one side where you've got to sit down with the child and the family and say, well, you can't have the operation this time round, and then the other side, when the operation is done, they look back at the photos and so on. And it must be emotionally, it must be really draining for you to be in that situation, because it's the extremes of it. I don't even talking about it. You think, well, that sounds that's got to be a really tough, rewarding, but a really tough few weeks. I mean, there's a way you try to deal with it yourself. I mean, I guess emotionally, it's very, very tough.
Yeah, it is emotionally very tough. But the thing which is really fantastic about it is that you have a group of 40 or 50 people coming together, and there's only one answer, and it's yes. And it's a real can-do attitude. It's a team of people. There's no blockers there. It's only solutions. And I think this is what I take home back with me, actually, is that, if someone says, oh, God, well, can't do this because this is, well, let's find a solution. We'll make a way of doing it. And I think that's what I've really learned from the whole of the Operation Smile projects that I've been on, is this kind of real can-do attitude. And you take it back to the NHS, you take it back to your own workplace. And, your overriding emotions are that I've always say when I'm talking to people who are raising money for us, I say, well, our part's the easy part. The hard part is for you guys who are raising money for us. The easy part is for us, because we go there and we're at the tip of that iceberg, and we're actually doing the work and seeing the results and getting instantaneous rewards for it. Whereas you guys in the background, without you guys raising the funds and supporting us, we just wouldn't be able to do them.
I mean, you mentioned about when you're on the missions, it's about helping to educate the people to do the work locally as well. I mean, is that sort of the ultimate aim for Operation Smile, is to have it where the skills are available locally so that the people can have these operations on a local scale?
Yes, absolutely, Paul. I think this is most incredibly important part of the programs, and I'll give you a few examples. Firstly, I go back to when I went on my first mission to Bogota in 1995. The whole team was from outside of Colombia, so we had 45 healthcare professionals going in, and they were all non-Colombian. Now, we did that mission, we operated on 200 children. We had the local nurses and doctors coming and helping us during that time, and we started doing education programs and teaching. Now, 25 years later, Colombia is totally self-sufficient. They have their own cleft centres. In fact, they even raise their own money. They have Colombian surgeons operating on Colombian children, being anaesthetised by Colombian anaesthetists, being looked after by Colombian nurses. And that is job done. It means going forward, they are looking after their own people, and we're not having to go in and do the extra stuff. And that, if I was to encapsulate what we're trying to achieve, that is what we're trying to achieve. And every country is a little bit different in how developed they are. And obviously it takes shorter or longer period of times in different countries, and often there's huge backlogs. But that is our aim, is so that we're no longer needed. And I say it's beautiful to see that in somewhere like Colombia, where I went on my first mission. We don't only do education on the missions. I put together a few other kind of schemes as well. And just looking at Ethiopia, for example, in Ethiopia, back in 2005 when I first went, virtually all anaesthetics were given by anaesthetic nurses. So there were only 23 doctors who gave anaesthetics at the time in the whole of Ethiopia. I met one of those, Yamani, in Jima, where I spent an awful lot of time. And he's, over the last 15 years, become a very good friend, very dedicated doctor who's an anaesthetist there. And his dream was to train more doctors to become anaesthetists and have a whole residency program so that all the anaesthetics in his hospital were given by doctors. And so we got together and we were trying to work out a way of doing this. And I suggested that I give a lot of talks at home to my trainees all around the country. And they come to me and say, I'd really like to help. How can we, they get really kind of excited about it. And they can't go on normal operation style missions because they're not fully trained. So we put together this scheme, this 5-year program, where my senior trainees would volunteer to go to Jima for 3 to 6 months and would help to encourage and train the doctors in Jima to become anaesthetists and help set up a residency program. So over that period of 5 years, I had 9 of my senior trainees go out there. And they've all, every single one of them has said it's the most rewarding thing they've ever done. And they've all gone back and helped out later on as well. And now in Ethiopia, we have a residency program where there are 30 doctors training to be anaesthetists over a 3-year program. And every year there's another 10 doctors signing up to train to be anaesthetists. And when you consider that 15 years ago there were only 23 doctors in the whole of Ethiopia who were anaesthetists, now we've got 30 training to be anaesthetists in Jima alone. And it was very touching, and I was very humbled when Yamani asked me to go over and help do the examinations of the first cohort coming through. And it was just lovely after 3 years of seeing these people come through to be able to examine them. And they all passed with flying colours. And now Yamani has a residency program, he has colleagues, and he has a sustainable program going forward, which is going to make a huge difference. And we've done it as well. We've tried to do it with the surgeons in the same kind of way. And that education, you can't, that is so important. Me going there for 2 weeks is going to have an impact, but to train someone who's going to be there forever is going to have a much bigger impact. And if I were to give you a picture of when I give talks, if I was only to put one slide up, it would be a picture of this operating table in the Jima operating theatre. And at the end of the table, there's this young trainee surgeon, Rohana, and she's just started training to be a surgeon. And she's operating on a child for a cleft lip. Standing next to her is Jonas, who is someone who is a trained surgeon who we'd trained to do cleft lips on and the previous year. And he's standing there training his trainee to do the operation. Then looking after the patient, this is a 1-year-old child on there, we have Milion, who is an anaesthetist who I met virtually on his first day of anaesthetic training, and we've trained through the years, and he's giving the anaesthetic to this 1-year-old as a highly trained paediatric anaesthetist. So you've got an Ethiopian anaesthetist anaesthetising a child to be operated on by an Ethiopian trainee being trained by an Ethiopian surgeon. And that is a picture I put at the end of all my talks. And it's what we are trying to achieve. And it always, it's just lovely to manage to do that.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, even in this last 40 minutes, you've touched on so many amazing things that yourself and the team have achieved. I mean, what is next for you? I mean, what is this, a specific mission that will be lined up when you can get out, or is there anything specific that you have in the pipeline for Operation Smile?
Well, as you well know, we're in very difficult times at the moment. I mean, for example, last year, 2019, we had programs in 32 countries across the world. We ran 172 missions, and we, operated and changed the lives of over 16,000 children with cleft lips and palates. Now, obviously, since March this year, we haven't been able to do any of that. And that's been quite devastating for us, really. So I'm I quite like my maths. And, when you consider that there's one child born every 3 minutes with a cleft lip or palate, that means that every year there's 175,000 children born with cleft lip or palate. Of those, 1 in 10 will die before the age of 1, which is frightening when you think about it. They don't need to die. If they were living in the UK or the US, that wouldn't happen. And the other really awful thing is 70% of those children won't get an operation at all. So in these 5 to 6 months, there's been approximately 8,000 children being born with a cleft lip or palate, of which 56,000 will never have an operation. Now, we would do some of those operations, and we would be training people to do those operations. But not only did we have the backlog from previously, we now have another 56,000 who won't be getting an operation. So this is very heartbreaking for us. So what we're doing in the interim, what we've been doing over the last 6 months, is that because we have warehouses and offices in all these countries we work in with a lot of medical equipment, we've redistributed all our equipment. We're getting it all the way to local hospitals so that they can use it in this fight against COVID. So at least we're managing to do something there. We've also managed to keep a register of as many new children who are born with cleft palates or cleft lips, and so that we have a register so that when we can start going again and we can start helping the local people do the operations, at least we'll have a register of these people. And one of the key things is, of course, if you're born with a cleft lip or palate, you're going to have difficulty with nutrition. So we've been having nutrition programs from in country, where we've been helping to provide these extremely poor families with nutrition so the children are fed well enough so that when we get around to actually being able to operate again, at least they won't be malnourished and they'll be fit enough to have the operations. Now, we're hoping that come January next year, we'll be able to hopefully start sending people out to these countries again. It's going to vary from country to country. And we're hoping that that we'll be able to start doing that. We're also supporting in a similar way to this with Zoom education and things like that. Surgeons who, like Ethiopian surgeons or Colombian surgeons, giving them support and encouraging them to be able to do the operations while we're not there. So our moving the charity forward, at the moment we're dealing with what we're having to deal with due to COVID. I think long term, what I would really like to see is partnerships between non-NGOs around the world to all work together. I'm very keen that we don't reinvent the wheel, so that different charities work together to not only provide cleft surgery. So for every anaesthetist I train, they might anaesthetise 1,000 children with cleft, but they'll also be anaesthetising 10,000, 100,000 people in their own careers with other operations, and provide safe anesthesia and safe surgery for everyone going forward. And it's supporting, bringing organisations together to make safe surgery safe throughout all these countries that at the moment are having great difficulties.
No, I mean, I guess with everything that you've been talking about today, I mean, is it too simplistic to say that the only thing that holds Operation Smile back is the funding? If you had more funding, then it'd be obviously then easier for you to reach out to more countries, to educate more people, and to get to where you want to be sooner. I mean, is that too simplistic to put it that way?
Funding is hugely important. We have, across the world, we have about 5,000 Operation Smile volunteers. The more funding we have, the more missions we can do. and the more people we can send out to help do the education, educate the local people. There are other issues that are involved with that as well, because you need healthcare professionals to train in the countries we go to, and therefore we need to also work alongside countries, encouraging them to support training of their own healthcare professionals so that we can then help them train their professionals. So funding is massive. It's absolutely massive. Obviously, the more we get, the more we can do. So yeah, it's absolutely crucial. But we also need more volunteers, and we need governments to be able to encourage and help us make them move forward in their healthcare systems as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I found the conversation, though, I mean, it's been amazing to speak to you, because clearly, as I mentioned right at the start, it's something that I've got a personal connection with, and I think the work that you and the team do is amazing. And I mean, there's not many other words I can use to describe it. So I think the help that you're giving to these people is unbelievable. And as you say, it's those stories you've told today, and the ones that you can see online where the difference in before and after the operation is huge, and the impact it makes on people's lives. It's inspiring, and I think it's as you say, I mean, it's amazing work that you guys are doing. So for us to be partnering with you on this is great, and we're obviously going to do as much as we can to keep raising awareness of it and helping to raise funds towards the cause as well. So obviously anything we can do to help, we'll be on the case for that as well.
Thank you very much, Paul. I mean, it has been a pleasure talking to you, and I think you very much have a very personal kind of attachment to this organisation, having gone through it yourself. And I think, as you said earlier on, the fact that you had all the support in this country, and you had the operations at the right time, a fantastic outcome, you've been able to have a fantastic, successful career. And without us doing this work, and without you supporting us, there's people who will be like you in other countries who would never have that opportunity. And I think it's absolutely crucial that we give that support to as many of those children as absolutely possible.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, if any of the listeners want to reach out to you directly, Phil, I mean, what's the easiest way they can do that?
If they want to reach me directly, I am on LinkedIn, which is where you've got this connection from. They can go directly to the Operation Smile UK website, and there's a direct link there. There's a phone number. They can phone the office if they want to talk to someone in person. There's always someone manning the phones, whether virtual or not. I'm very happy for anyone can contact me. You have my email address, you have my phone number. If anyone wants to chat about anything, feel free to contact me. I'm always available, and I personally love the organisation, and I love talking about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, that's great. And obviously, what we do when the podcast goes out, we'll make sure that we've got your contact details aligned with the podcast as well, and Operation Smile's details on there as well. So if people want to reach out to you, the organisation, or indeed myself, then they definitely can do on that side. So yeah, well, I guess I'll definitely say is a huge thanks today, Phil, for going through this with us. Really appreciate your time, and I look forward to the partnership, really.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.